For more on the fiscal cliff negotiations, I'm joined by Congressman Peter Welch, Democrat from Vermont. Congressman, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So what should the deal look like? All this chatter, all this smoke and mirrors, what is the deal that you would like to see?
Well, first of all, I do believe that the middle class has a real stake in a good, solid, balanced deficit reduction plan. And the plan should be what the president campaigned on, namely balanced. And that means we've got to have a substantial contribution from revenues. The revenues have to come from the folks who've been making good money during the recession. That's folks over 250 or some number close to that. The Pentagon's got to make a contribution. And if there is anything on health care, it's got to be about reforming it, bringing the costs down, not cutting benefits.
Well, let's drill down a couple pieces of this. What do you think the underlying ratio should be between cost cutting and revenue generation? Last summer it was 10 to 1 in terms of cutting costs to revenue, and thankfully that deal didn't get done. Should it be 1 to 1? The president is basically 2 to 1 cost to revenue. Where would you like to see this happen?
Well, you know, I actually don't know that number because I think the question is, I think we need about $1.5 trillion from revenues. And the revenues have to come, as I mentioned, the way President Obama was campaigning. And then the Pentagon's got to make a contribution. And we've already cut $1.5 trillion on domestic discretionary. So we're going to have to cut more to get a deal. But what the ratio is, I haven't been that close to what the numbers are.
Well, one of the issues lurking out there is the debt ceiling, and it seems necessary to me to include as part of this grand bargain, if one is ever struck, an agreement that there will not be another negotiation in a month or two because the Republicans in the House refuse to raise the debt ceiling. Does that have to be wrapped into this deal?
Well, absolutely. You know, we committed political malpractice in 2011. You know, we got a stick-up, really. McConnell held out for the $800 billion in tax breaks for the high-income folks. We got $13 billion in extended unemployment benefits. That was in December. And then you come back in April and May, we start arguing about the debt ceiling, and we had to raise it in order to meet the deal that the president agreed to. So we cannot make the same mistake twice. That has to be part of any resolution.
I could not agree more with you. I remember when this happened, a lot of folks, I included, were screaming, saying, wrap this into one bargain, you're going to be held up again. And for whatever reason, the White House didn't listen. The Republicans, and this is good news, I suppose, have used the word revenues, so the contours of the debate have shifted. But they're a little sort of mushy. There's at least 3 different theories here. You can have the bucket approach where you cap deductions, you can eliminate particular loopholes, or you can raise rates above the 250, going back to the Clinton-era rates. Of the 3, which do you think they actually intend to do?
They want to talk about revenue generating from eliminating deductions or capping them. They don't want to talk about rates. And, you know, the bottom line here is that we need a certain amount of revenues. Let's say the president's talking $1.6 trillion. And he's also saying they have to come from the folks 250 and above, particularly folks making more than $1 million. So however you do that is fine. What you want to make certain we do is don't put a hit on the middle class because they can't afford it, and that will hurt the economic recovery. And by the way, you know, this is an opportunity on debt reduction to talk about our budget. There are areas we should be spending money, like infrastructure. I mean, it's incredible that we've got this 19th century infrastructure in this country and think we're going to be a global economic power. We ought to be talking about reforming health care, not just Medicare. But, you know, why don't we negotiate prices for prescription drugs? That would save us $160 billion over 10 years. The fee-for-service, volume-driven system that is making it unaffordable. These are things that ought to be put into the discussion and not have it just be what's the ratio. Because bottom line, we ought to come up with something that's more efficient, more effective, more sustainable.
You were making such a hugely important point. No question that when it comes to health care, we have to bend that curve, to use the sort of language of Washington, D.C., or else we will have a crisis. On the other hand, there are other areas of government spending where we must invest. And as you point out, in 19th century infrastructure does not make us competitive. And what's been lost in some of the conversation here is the necessity of making those investments. Are you going to try to lead the charge to bring us back to a more sensible middle ground on this?
Well, I am. And I think there's some Republicans that might agree on that. I mean, what we've been here for 2 years is in just ideological lockdown. We haven't been into problem solving. And bottom line, Republicans are now starting to acknowledge we need revenues. Whether the Speaker is going to be successful in getting them to say yes when he gets specific remains to be seen. And by the way, I think it's much more important for us to get a good, substantial deal that's sustainable and really makes a dent in the deficit without hurting the economy. And if we do that on January 15th and it's a good deal, I'd much prefer that over doing a bad deal on December 15th just for face saving on the January 1 fiscal cliff drop dead date.
Well, you are among the group that has been called the cliff jumpers. If you know, I don't know how you take that phrase, but you've been willing to say, as you just did, let's go over the cliff. It really will not be as dangerous and as cataclysmic as people are saying.
Well, I'm in good company.
Use it.
I'm in good company with Warren Buffett. I mean, basically, this artificial deadline is not a cliff, it's a slope. And the bottom line is we've got to get a good deal, something that's sustainable and durable, and not hit the panic button and then try to spin what is a bad deal as a good deal, because that won't be sustainable after January 1st.
Look, that is not only correct on the substance, but unless we say that, the other side is just going to stick us up and hold us to the deadline and get us to flinch at the end, which unfortunately had been the history of this White House in the last couple of years. And so your wisdom there, I hope they're listening loud and clear to you, Congressman.
Thank you.
Congressman Peter Welch, Democrat from Vermont, as always, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Elliot.
For more on growth